Well, hello, everybody. It's a beautiful night in Florida, and I wish that Alan Lightman were here with us, and he promises that he will come next year with another new book, so I'm going to hold him to that. I just said that in public, so now he's stuck. But I'm really excited. I'm always excited to talk to you, but I'm really excited. This book, Probable Impossibilities, which is coming out in paperback next week, Musings on Beginnings and Endings. I mean, it's this tiny little tome that, packs a wallop for such a small book. But I have to say, a lot of these books seem small. My absolute favorite, which is Mr. G, also seems tiny, but just chock full of such wonderful ideas. In Praise of Wasting Time, a tiny little book. Reunion, more of a normal sized book. And I should tell you, so I don't forget, that this addresses the question I'm going to say about your sense of wonderment that persists in spite of, or maybe because of, your scientific basis, is children's book, Ada and the Galaxies, which is the wonderment of a child discovering the world with an adult who also still has the same wonderment as the child. So I find that reassuring. So Alan Lightman is the author, as you can tell, of novels, children's books now, as well as nonfiction. He's the first to ever have a joint appointment in the humanities and science at MIT. He's been called the poet laureate of science. I call him my poet physicist, because his writing is lyrical and his views of the cosmos and the world are lyrical and, again, full of awe. So this tiny little book raises amazingly big questions about where we are in the cosmos, what makes us human. Do we need God to come before the Big Bang to set off all these reactions that make us who we are? Are we just a collection of neurons? I mean, what defines us? How does art and science? I mean, there's so much wonderful stuff in here. So I'm going to let you kick it off, and I invite people to be typing in their questions as we go, because your mind is just going to be expanding, and don't sit on it. Just let it go. So thank you, Alan, so much for joining us. I just can't tell you how I've been looking forward to this.
Well, thank you, Rona. The bookmark in Florida has always held a special place in my heart. And I went there almost 30 years ago with my book, Einstein's Dreams. And I'm not sure, were you there at that time, Rona?
No, I missed the kickoff, but I've been the happy recipient of everything afterwards. So thank you.
But I have known you for a long time, and really appreciate the encouragement that you have given me as a writer. And you always have wonderful events there when I come there, so thank you for that. So the new book, Probable Impossibilities, is broadly about how we fit in the cosmos, we human beings. It's a collection of essays. There's an interview with a man named Andrei Lindy, a Russian-American physicist who has theories about what came before the Big Bang and many other universes besides ours. There's an interview with a biologist named Jack Szostak, who may be the first person to create a living organism from scratch in the laboratory, and it raises questions about what constitutes life, and is a living thing just atoms and molecules, or is it more than atoms and molecules? There are a lot of different topics in the book, but all of them relate to how we fit in the cosmos, how we human beings. And I wanted to talk for maybe 5 minutes about one of the ideas in the book, and then Rona, you and I can have a conversation after that, or I can get questions from your devoted listener. So around 2009 or so, there was a satellite launched in space called the Kepler Satellite, or the Kepler telescope. It was launched on a missile and a satellite that orbits the Earth above the Earth's atmosphere, a orbiting telescope. And it was designed specifically to look for habitable planets beyond our solar system. And a habitable planet is a planet that is just the right distance from its central star so that it's not too hot and too cold. It can have liquid water. And biologists think that you need liquid water to have life. So if you're too close to your central star, it's too hot and the water boils away. And if you're too far away, everything freezes. So there's kind of a zone that a planet can be in and be habitable. And the Kepler satellite found that roughly 10% of all stars have at least one habitable planet. So that seems like, that means almost certainly there's life elsewhere in the universe. We don't know how many of those habitable planets are actually inhabited. We just know that they could be inhabited because they could have liquid water. But that allowed me to do a calculation of what is the fraction of all matter in the universe in living form. And I assume that there is, in fact, life on every habitable planet. And I assume that every habitable planet was similar to Earth. And what I found is that even if you assume that every habitable planet in the universe has life, that still the fraction of all material in the universe that is in living form is extremely small, 1/billionth of 1/billionth, that fraction. It's equivalent to 1 grain of sand on the Gobi Desert. So if the Gobi Desert is all matter in the universe, only 1 grain of sand on that desert would be in living form. So those of us who have the special arrangement of atoms and molecules that make us alive, we're very rare. But we're also rare in time as well as in space. In 1998, it was discovered that the universe is not only expanding, but that expansion is accelerating. So the speed at which galaxies are moving away from each other is increasing in time. And from the rate of acceleration, you can figure out that in about 100 billion years from now, the IRS will probably still be collecting taxes 100 billion years from now. 100 billion now years, I say the tax season, 100 billion years from now, that we will be cut off from all other galaxies in the universe. And after our sun burns out, which will happen in only 10 billion years, there will be no longer any way for us to get energy from the rest of the universe. And not only us, but any galaxy will be cut off from every other galaxy. And when all the stars die out, which will be less than 100 billion years, there will no longer be any energy left in the universe to support life, and all life in the universe will end. So the era in which life can exist in any form is a very short period in the long history of the universe. 100 billion years might seem like a long time, but the universe is going to last much, much longer than that. And in fact, if you talk about this in terms of factors of 10, only 3 factors of 10 out of 73 factors of 10 can life arise at all in the universe. You can call that the era of life. So not only is life rare in terms of the amount of life in the universe, but it's also can exist only during a narrow window of time and the full evolution of the universe. So we atoms and molecules that are in living form are rare not only in time and space, but in time. And So the question is, what do you make of that fact that we're so rare? And what I make of it is it gives me a feeling of kinship with all the other living beings in the universe, that even though I'll never meet those other beings, probably never communicate with them, that we have a certain kinship because we are that rare arrangement of matter and living form. We living beings are the only way that the universe can comment on itself, can observe itself. Without living beings, the universe can't comment on itself. There are no spectators. So we living beings in the universe, this rare combination of atoms, both in space and in the time in which we exist, we are the only way that the universe can observe itself and comment on itself. And that is a concept that I call cosmic biocentrism, this connection between, this kinship between living things. So that's one of the ideas in the book. And I won't try to describe other ideas right now. But if you wanted to ask me a question or talk about something that struck your fancy.
Well, yeah, I invite people to type in things, but a couple of things struck me when you were saying that. I remember when you talked about humans being the spectators of the universe, and that's what gives the universe meaning. So without humans, then the universe is persisting. I mean, if it's hard for us to envision it, a billion years might seem like infinity, but it's not infinity. I mean, it exists. So in a billion years, if there's no one, it's like if the tree falls. I mean, if the billion years there's no one to be the spectator and give it meaning, what's it all about, Alfie? What does it mean?
Well, that's a great question. And I don't know whether you need to have permanence to have meaning. I think that it makes as much sense to ask, what is it that gives life meaning now when we're here? As to ask the question, what gives meaning to the universe when there's no longer any life left?
Right.
So, of course, the question, what gives the life meaning now, is also a very difficult question. I don't believe that there's any cosmic meaning. I think that each individual living being, each individual human being has to decide what their own meaning is. I used to think that to have meaning, you had to have permanence. You had to have some kind of permanent scaffolding by which to judge events. And I don't think that anymore. I think that meaning can be, just in the moment. And of course, that's a Buddhist idea as well. Mindfulness is a Buddhist concept in which we give meaning and we honor each moment of existence.
So is there? I don't know that there's anything that has permanence. We certainly, as each individual, don't have permanence. We're all just a blip on the screen here.
Right. Yeah.
And maybe as we age, we get more aware of that blipness. That our time is very limited. So there's no permanence to that. I guess the other thing that strikes me when you talk about all that is I love the humility. You're kind of putting us in our place. On the one hand, there's something that makes us special beyond just being a collection of neurons. On the other things, we are a blip, and there's life all around that we may or may not come to know or not know. And so what makes us so special?
Well, we've been losing our specialness since Copernicus in the 16th century. when Copernicus said the Earth is not the center of the solar system.
Right.
So I think we've been getting used to being just run of the mill for a long time.
Well, maybe that's a more sociological, political question, that we still think we're the center of the universe, and maybe
I'm sure there are a lot of people who still think that. Yeah.
And I think it's important to not. I mean, I think I like the humility that this view
Right.
introduces. That really leads to
Yep.
the next question to me of, what makes us human as opposed to other living beings, even other sentient living beings. What makes us human?
Well, I think if we ask the question, what makes us conscious, which is a closely related question, I think there's a gradation of consciousness. I think dolphins and crows and whales are pretty smart, and I think if dolphins actually have more neurons than humans do in the frontal portion of their brain. If they had hands and could manipulate their environment, I think that they would be sitting in the White House. They would be running the show. So I think when you talk about what makes us human, I think that you have to keep in mind that we are a continuum of animals. We're an animal. We're very similar to other animals. We have but because we have hands and we can manipulate our environment, we're able to write down histories and record memories and pass down knowledge in the way that dolphins and crows cannot. I think that our sense of morality and ethics is not particularly it's not particular to humans. That crows, for example, have shown and monkeys have shown ethical behavior and caring for each other. I think, having a sense of personal dignity is something we also often associate with humans. I'm not sure that crows and monkeys and dolphins don't have a dignity. So I'm not sure that there are any particular, having a sense of dignity, having a sense of caring for other human beings. These are, of course, wonderful, admirable traits that we human beings have. They're bestness. Of course, we have many ugly, terrible traits as well, as we're seeing in the world today. But I don't think that any of those traits are unique to Homo sapiens. I'll put it that way. I do think that we are evolving into something very different than what we are now with our technology. We can now implant electrodes in the brain that can allow paralyzed people to move things just by pure thought.
Right.
I think it's just a matter of time before we have implant electrodes in the brain to connect us directly to the internet. I think we will have eye implants in the future that allow us to see X-rays and radio waves and other kinds of electromagnetic radiation that are invisible to us now. So I think that we are evolving into creatures that are part human and part machine. You might call that homo techno. we're evolving, and it's an interesting question. What traits of Homo sapiens will be preserved and should be preserved as we evolve into things that are part human and part machine? So it's related to your question of what makes us human.
Yeah. So
It's
all
just
the
another
all the
question.
talk about artificial intelligence and can you make a robot human? There's a great novel out by Ishiguro Clara and the Sun about a robot, and can you make a robot have a human heart with feelings, and can you love a robot, and how much can they learn? It's really, you're sort of flipping that on its head. It's not really can a robot be human, but how robotic can a human be and still be human?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So in the evolutionary scheme of things, I remember it was always hard to understand the concept that we evolve and that evolution wasn't designed to get to us. We're not like some magic endpoint of the purpose of evolution. I mean, it's a process.
Right.
So do you see us
Right.
evolving into something else?
Well, I think
Or
we're
into
evolving into
extinction?
something right now. We're not evolving by the forces of natural selection and survival of the fittest. We're evolving by technology, by our own hand. I mean, just the rudimentary eyeglasses and hearing aids that allow us to see better and to hear better. That's human made. Those devices. They're they're artificial in a way.
Right.
So we're on a new path of evolution, which is driven by technology, which in turn is driven by our brains.
So we've tinkered enough with the universe that we're now adapting to a tinkered with the universe.
Yeah, well,
I mean, it's
we're
no longer
creating a
man in
new.
nature.
Yeah, we're creating a new world. Not all aspects of that world are going to be pleasant. I mean, our enormous demand for energy has led to the global warming crisis. So we need to think more thoughtfully about this evolution that's going on, this technological evolution. We need to add our human values to that evolution. We can't just let technology run on its own. I think technology by itself doesn't have values. It's we human beings that give it values. And so we need to be more thoughtful about the way that we're developing our technology, including our use of energy, demands for energy, and so many other things.
It's interesting.
Henry David Thoreau. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just remember a statement in your book where you're saying nature is neutral as well.
Nature is neutral as well.
Yes.
Nature doesn't care about us.
Right. But we need to care about technology and nature.
Well, we need to care about ourselves.
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't want to cut you off talking about Henry David Thoreau. He's one of my favorites. So please.
Yeah. Well, Henry David Thoreau, I live just a mile from Walden Pond, where Henry David Thoreau wrote a great book, Walden. I walk around there many times. And of course, at the time that Henry David Thoreau lived, like around 1850 or so, the new technology was the railroad. That was the advanced technology. And in Walden, there's a line which I love. We don't ride the railroad rides us. And I think what he meant by that is that the technology is taking over when we should be guiding technology. Technology is pushing us in certain directions, which is Thoreau was objecting to that state of affairs, and I would also object to the state of affairs today, where we seem to be pursuing technology for its own sake without considering how it's actually affecting the quality of life. It might not improve the quality of life to build a car that can go twice as fast, even if you're able to build a car that goes twice as fast. It may not improve the quality of life to have handheld devices that connect us to the internet 24/7, even though we're able to build such devices.
So what's the role of science in all of that? I mean, you talk about science and religion and science and art and science philosophy. What's the interface and what's the role of science in this homo techno being?
Well, science has a practical side, and it has you might call I won't call it impractical, but I would call it a pure side, a non-applied side, whose aim is simply the pursuit of knowledge. And I think that we're always going to be trying to learn more about how the world works. That's part of human curiosity. That's the pure side of science. And then you have the applied side of science, which would include engineering. And that's all the devices that we build, including living structures. I think that the applied science side of science is fueled by capitalism, the desire to make money. Whereas the pure side of science does not have that propulsion. It's more human desire for knowledge, curiosity.
Am I naive to hope that desire for knowledge and curiosity and that imagination and wonderment won't propel us to apply things better?
Well, I hope that you're right.
Me too. I invite people to join this conversation because, I could take this all kind of places, and I know Alan could talk about lots of stuff, but please share your thoughts and your comments and any questions, because this is a moment you don't want to miss. These are big ideas to ponder. I mean, you talk about our place between infinity and nothingness, and both of them are hard concepts, but nothingness is almost impossible to comprehend to me.
And it's impossible for me to comprehend as well.
So how do we even talk about it? It's like nailing Jello to a tree. I mean, how do you even put it in the formula from infinity to nothingness when you don't even know what the nothingness is? I mean, infinity, you kind of at least get the notion that it just keeps going on and on, but nothingness.
It's more of something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you can't really talk about nothingness. There was a time where we thought that there was that nothingness was the vacuum between objects. If you go into outer space, there's no air. There's space. Well, of course, space is something. It's not nothing, but there was nothing in the space between the few molecules in outer space. But physicists have learned that even the vacuum is not empty, that has subatomic particles that are appearing and disappearing in nanoseconds very, very quickly. So there is no nothingness that we know about. It's really a hypothetical concept, nothingness. It's an abstract. I mean, suppose I asked you, what is it going to be like when you're dead?
That's exactly where this takes me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where this goes.
Right.
When you don't exist,
Yeah,
what is
and
that
I
like?
can't comprehend that.
Well,
Can you comprehend that?
you can't imagine it. You can't comprehend it. You can't imagine it. You can't. Well, a more pleasant way of putting it is what was it like before you were born?
Right. That is more pleasant, but it is the same
The
notion,
same
because
thing that you can't.
you're not there to contemplate it, so you can't be
You're
contemplating.
not
It's kind of a do
right.
loop
It's an
round and around the
abstract.
circle.
Right. It's an abstract. It's an abstract concept.
But you have this wonderful notion that, all of our neurons and atoms are going to be living on beyond us in other beings
Well,
and
our
soils
atoms,
and plants.
our atoms and
Our
molecules,
atoms.
our atoms and molecules. Yeah, our atoms and molecules will exist after our bodies disintegrate. The atoms and molecules will mix with the soil and the air and the oceans and eventually become parts of other people. And if you
That's
could
reassuring.
label
That's a
each
now
one of
thing.
your,
We can appreciate that now, but at the time, we'll be nothing and won't be able to
yeah,
appreciate it. That's the concept.
right.
So.
Well, it's an interesting thing to think about, that if you could label each one of your atoms with your social security number, let's say,
Yeah.
and follow them after you're dead, after you no longer have a mind, you no longer have a brain, you no longer have a consciousness, those atoms will still be there. Some of them will be in the ground, some of them will be in the water, some of them will come absorbed by other plants, and some of those atoms, your atoms, will eventually become parts of other people, which is a pretty astonishing, amazing thought, but it's true. And even though those atoms won't know that they were once part of you, they will once have been part of you. So
that is very reassuring.
Yeah, it's a kind of immortality. It's not completely satisfying, but it's the best we can give you.
And we won't know because there's nothingness. So we're back in that. This is the stuff that just makes your head spin in a good way. I mean, I think these are all good things. We do have a question that says, great chat, Alan and Rona. Alan, you referenced lab-made life. Are we close to understanding how life and consciousness originally came about?
Well, we're close to understanding how life came about. Right now, the molecules that carry the information to create a new being are DNA. But there's a close cousin of DNA called RNA, ribonucleic acid, which is very similar in structure, but has only one strand instead of double strands. And we think that biologists have been able to produce RNA out of the chemicals that were present in the primitive Earth. So to produce a living organism, you need a cell wall to contain the material. You need a replicating molecule inside of that cell wall that has the instructions for making a new thing. And you need it to be able to evolve. You need it to be able to reproduce and evolve and harness energy sources in its vicinity. And biologists have been able to create cell walls from scratch. When I say from scratch, I mean from the chemical elements that were present in the early Earth. They've been able to create RNA. Where they're stuck for the moment is that the RNA that they're able to create in the lab from these basic chemicals can reproduce one or two generations, but not beyond that. So to be able to create an organism that can evolve, you need to be able to reproduce many generations. So that's the point that we're at now. And one of the leading biologists working on that is I mentioned, is a man named Jack Szostak, who's at Harvard. He's a Nobel Prize winner for a different work, for showing how DNA ages. But he's been working on the origins of life now for a number of years. And it's very possible that the first living organism created from scratch will come out of his lab.
And what does that mean for us?
Well, it's a great question. I think one of the things it means is that you don't need anything supernatural to create life. If you can create a living organism that where biologists agree that this thing is alive, it reproduces, it evolves. And the first living thing that's made will be even simpler than an amoeba. But if you can create such a thing in the laboratory just from chemicals, then it shows that you do not need supernatural events. You don't need some mysterious intervention to create life. And that, of course, has profound philosophical and theological implications.
Yeah, because there seems to be, I mean, the haunting question is always, what comes before the Big Bang, and do you need God to set the fuse? I mean, that's a really simple way to put it. But do you need God to, make this all work? And you see scientists struggle with this, and some of them, as they get older, they sort of find God more than they did when they were younger. And so, Where does that take us?
Well, you can ask the question: if you create life from scratch, eventually we'll be able to create multicellular organisms from scratch, and maybe at some point we'll be able to create a whole, a rabbit from scratch, or maybe even a whole human being. So if you can create something from scratch like that, how should we regard it? Should we regard it the same way that we regard naturally, quote, naturally made things? Should it have the same rights, should be granted the same ethical integrity? Would it have a soul? Would it be conscious? Those are all questions.
So when you talk about this, you smile. What are you smiling about?
Well, I'm just smiling to think how awesome it is that science can do these things, and that we have these. But then it raises all of these questions, because we're not just scientists; we're human beings as well, and we think about the meaning of things. We human beings, we don't just build things. We don't just build smartphones and antibiotics. We think about what these things mean. And, maybe that comes along with higher intelligence, that bigger brains just unavoidably think about what it all means.
But it's hard not to smile at the amazement. I mean, it's just, I'm smiling that it can happen, and the ethical questions are mind boggling, and they're onerous, but it's just amazing.
Well, it's amazing what science has been able to do. I mean, if you took one of your smartphones now and you took it back just 100 years ago, and you showed somebody, say in the year 1900, this device where the person could talk to somebody else and see a picture of them, they would think it was black magic.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I mean, my mother was just boggled by a fax machine. That information could just come out, pictures, letters, everything could come out in a whole nother place. She just thought that was just beyond comprehension. So the things that amaze us, they just change, but there's always something that's going to amaze us. I have a question.
See a great, it's a great question. If consciousness, can everybody see that on the screen, or should we read it?
They can see it, but we should read it. Yeah.
If consciousness is due to arrangement, if consciousness is due to arrangements of neurons and thus of atoms and molecules, and if consciousness allows us to observe and comment on the universe, could we then say the universe on some level is conscious? After all, we're not observers standing outside the universe, by John Moraldo. That's a wonderful point, and I agree with you that in some level, you can say the universe is conscious. And when there's no longer any life left in the universe, which we think, scientists think will be the case in about 100 billion years, then the universe is no longer conscious. So you could say, just as there's an era of life in the grand unfolding of the universe, there's an era of consciousness.
So this is just part of the process.
Yeah, it's part of the process. I mean, a universe could exist without life. In fact, in an idea called the multiverse, which is an idea that there are lots of different universes out there, and the multiverse is actually predicted. I'm going to have to move to another location because my battery's getting low. Sorry.
Okay. That's that technology thing.
Right. It's a technology thing.
So while Alan is repositioning,
the idea that there are other universes is actually predicted by some theories of physics, and most of the other universes that might exist, there's no life of any kind. That is, you need rather special conditions for life to arise. You need to be able to make complex atoms, for one thing. And in many possible universes, you cannot make complex atoms. So most of these universes don't have life at all. So life is a special phenomenon, which means that in the language of John Moraldo, most universes are not conscious.
doesn't that get us where we started? And what gives them meaning?
I think that I don't know what gives something meaning, but I think that for starters, you need a mind to provide meaning. I mean, if you have it's like you need a mind to designate something as beautiful. If you have a snow-covered mountain that's sort of and it's sort of glowing pink as the sun is rising, if nobody is there to see that, can you say that it's beautiful?
This is where you could use the question I told you couldn't ask. And what do you think it means, Rhoda?
Well, it's a rhetorical question.
No, I'm giving you permission. It's okay.
Yeah.
Was there something you wanted to read to us to share?
I'll read a really short piece, a short section, if I can find it. And this this short section is what I described at the beginning of my talk. So I'll just read it. With the discoveries of the Kepler Satellite in the last 5 years, it's almost certain that life exists elsewhere in the universe. The Kepler discoveries, plus the rarity of life in time and in space, discussed here, lead to a concept I'll call cosmic biocentrism. And by that, I mean that the rarity and preciousness of life provides a kinship to all living things in the universe. I can't imagine what kinds of thoughts, what kinds of values and principles other living beings might have. But we share something in the vast hallways of this cosmos we find ourselves in. What exactly is it we share? Certainly the mundane attributes of life, the ability to separate ourselves from our surroundings, to utilize energy sources, to grow, to reproduce, to evolve. I'd argue that we conscious beings share something more during our relatively brief moment in the era of life. The ability to witness and reflect on the spectacle of existence, a spectacle that it is at once mysterious, joyous, tragic, trembling, majestic, confusing, cosmic, comic, nurturing, unpredictable and predictable, ecstatic, beautiful, cruel, sacred, devastating, exhilarating. The cosmos will grind on for eternity long after we're gone, cold and unobserved. But for these few powers of 10, we have been, we have seen, we have felt, we have lived. So that's just a little snatch.
It's a kind of a big snatch. There's a lot in that little snatch.
Yep.
Well, I would end on that note. Unless somebody has another question, I would just say, if you haven't read Alan Lightman, you need to rectify that, because it's well worth every second. And this book in particular, it'll be in paperback next week. You really should do yourself the favor, because it's the kind of thing that will make your mind work and make you think about all those questions that you can't quite put in order, but they're in your mind. So you might as well try and find a little bit of order out of chaos, although there's nothing wrong with the chaos either. That's all right. And I just thank you, and I'm going to hold you that you're going to come visit us next year.
I will.
I look forward to every one of your books and read them all, and they just mean a lot to me, as you do. So I thank you, and I thank everyone who's participated, and stay well, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Well, thank you, Rona. Thank you for inviting me, and I always love being in the bookmark, whether virtually or in person.
Anytime. I'm going to hold you to that. And thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening, and think all these wonderful thoughts. I can hear the discussions that everybody's having right now, and it makes me smile. So thanks a lot. Good night.
Okay. Good night. Bye-bye.